Hey guys, tonight we descend into a realm where the shadows lean too close. The air smells faintly of wet coins and burnt rosemary. And the silence doesn't just wait, it watches. You're standing at the edge of something vast and very, very final. The Greek Underworld. And no, you probably won't survive this. But honestly, nobody does. So at least the pressure's off. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know your location and what time it is where you're tuning in from. I love seeing who's sleepless with me around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The entrance isn't marked with a neon sign or a blinking arrow. It's just a crack in the earth. Easily missed, unless you're already grieving or already dead. You stand there at the edge, watching mist curl upward like the world below is breathing. You step forward, and the ground tilts under you, then steadies. It's not falling exactly, more like descending into a place that was always under your feet, but just needed the right moment to open. You follow a narrow path lined with pale trees. The bark feels too smooth. The leaves never move. You see no birds. The only sound is the soft rush of moving water ahead, and the occasional squelch underfoot that you decide not to investigate too closely. Then, the river appears, black, wide, and slow. It doesn't reflect anything. The surface just swallows light. This is the Styx, the river of hate. Not rage, not fury. Hate. The kind that lingers. The kind that binds oaths and burns bridges with Olympic efficiency. In Greek mythology, even the gods swore by the Styx. Break that promise, and you'd be exiled from Olympus for 9 years. Historians still argue whether this was rooted in a real geographic waterway or purely symbolic. A kind of mythic consequence, placeholder for divine trust. On the bank sits a figure you've heard of, even if you can't remember where. Charon, the ferryman. Tall, hooded, cloak frayed at the edges like it's been on backorder for a few centuries. He doesn't speak, just holds out one hand. You fumble for a coin. Of course, you have one. That's how this dream logic works. It's cold, smooth, and heavier than it should be. You place it in his palm. He nods, gestures toward the boat. It's a narrow skiff that looks deeply unfit for heavy traffic. You step in. The river doesn't splash its size. As the boat pushes away, the bank disappears almost immediately, swallowed in gray mist. You drift. The ride isn't long, but it's not short either. You float through a quiet so deep, it starts to hum in your ears. Occasionally, you pass another boat. Empty, or not. You don't ask. You don't wave. It feels like the kind of place where even whispering someone's name is enough to keep them here. Eventually, the boat stops. No bump. No announcement. Just Arrival. You step out onto solid ground that isn't stone and isn't soil. Just underworld. The air feels heavier here. Like every breath costs a memory. Ahead looms a vast gate. Black metal. Silent. Guarded not by warriors or walls, but by rules. This is where the dead are sorted. Not judged, yet that comes later. First, you're cataloged. Named. Logged. Somewhere nearby. A scribe scribbles without looking up. Probably annoyed you didn't arrive in alphabetical order. You walk forward. Slowly. Unsure if you're a tourist or a participant. This is the Greek afterlife. And you've officially entered. There's no dramatic fanfare. Just the weight of forever settling softly on your shoulders. You walk past the black gates and into a realm that doesn't hum so much as brood. The ground shifts subtly beneath your feet, sometimes stone, sometimes dust, sometimes a sound you don't quite recognize, but sincerely hope is just your imagination. It's not loud here, just layered. Like silence is wearing 4 coats and sweating just a little. Up ahead. Past a grove of leafless trees that look like they're trying to remember how to bloom, stands a figure that could pass as a mortal man if he weren't radiating a kind of exhausted omnipotence. Robes that don't wrinkle. A beard that defies aging. A crown that's more bone than gold. You don't need anyone to introduce him. Hades, Lord of the Underworld. Ruler of the dead. God of logistics. Honestly, you expect thunder, or declarations, or even a flash of drama. But no, he's hunched over a desk of stacked scrolls, scribbling something with a stylus that looks like it's seen the fall of empires. There's a faint smell of parchment and existential dread. He glances up once as you pass, nods in a way that says, "Don't break anything," and goes back to tallying souls or managing metaphysical tax forms. The thing is, Hades wasn't evil. Not in the original stories. He wasn't Lucifer. He wasn't punishing people. He was just there. Stable. Dutiful. Maybe a little grumpy. But if your job involved managing every soul that ever lived, you'd probably also get really into spreadsheets and keeping your dog from eating the guests. Historians still argue whether the later portrayal of Hades as villainous was a result of Roman influence, early Christian retellings, or just people projecting their dislike of death onto a guy who really just wanted things to run on time. It's hard to be a fan favorite when your kingdom has a 100% no-return policy. Around his throne room, the architecture is all black marble and eternal mood lighting. The torches burn blue. There's no wind, no laughter, just order. The walls are lined with niches filled with objects left behind rings. Lockets, swords, sandals. Hades keeps everything. Or maybe the underworld does. Either way, nothing escapes. In the corner, you spot a helmet, just sitting there. Not dusty, not guarded. You don't touch it. You know what it is. The Helm of Darkness, said to render its wearer invisible. Even to the gods. Perseus used it. So did Athena. It's not a secret. It's a tool. Like most things in Hades' domain, you move on. Down a hallway carved from dark basalt and filled with faint echoes, none of them yours. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Not frightening, just untranslatable. You pass a room where shadows whisper to each other in dead dialects. Another, where memories drip from the ceiling like dew. Then a corridor that appears empty but hums like a tuning fork. You get the feeling that time doesn't work the same here. Or maybe it doesn't work at all. Eventually, you reach a wide chamber that opens into a garden. A real one. Or at least it looks that way. soft soil, low walls, fruit trees bearing glowing, unnatural fruit. The air smells like citrus and absinthe, and in the center stands Persephone. Her dress is red, her fingers stained with juice. She turns when she hears you, eyes bright but unreadable. She smiles not kindly, not coldly, just knowingly, like she's met people like you before. And maybe she has. Persephone is queen of this place. Not hostage, not guest. She walks with ownership in her step. And the underworld blooms behind her like it's trying to impress her. The myths vary. Some say she was kidnapped. Others say she ate the pomegranate willingly. Historians still debate whether her dual role as goddess of spring and queen of death was meant to reconcile older, seasonal rites or reflect deeper truths about life and change. Either way, she's here, and she doesn't seem in a hurry to leave. You nod. She nods back. And for a moment, the air feels less heavy. The underworld, slightly less final. You step past her garden, into the dusk beyond. The next part of your journey isn't a place, it's 5 of them. Because this is where the rivers begin, and not all of them are water. The path descends gently now, curving through a soft mist that clings to your ankles like curious fog. You start to hear it, before you see it, a low murmur. The sound of water flowing, whispering, occasionally gurgling like it's clearing its throat with bad intentions. The underworld isn't a single place. After all, it's a network, a map, a looping, eternal circulatory system, and its veins are rivers. 5 of them, each with a mood, each with a purpose, each with at least one reason you'd prefer not to fall in. The first river you come to is Acheron, the river of pain. It flows slow and dark. Not angry, just heavy. The water seems reluctant to move, as if every drop is dragging centuries of regret behind it. Souls gather at its edge, not screaming, not crying, just wading in slowly, like they've been waiting for this their whole lives. Maybe they have. In some myths, Acheron is the river that Chiron ferries across. Rather than Styx, historians still argue whether Acheron and Styx were originally the same or evolved separately as poetic traditions overlapped. Either way, they're not here to soothe you. You crouch by the river's edge. The water is cold just by proximity. You don't touch it. It doesn't ask to be touched. You move on. Next comes Cocytus, the river of wailing. You hear it from a distance. A sorrowful, ghostly cry that loops endlessly. It's not screaming. It's more intimate than that. It sounds like a choir made of regrets and bedtime confessions. The river itself is thinner, braided between rocky channels, and seems to be flowing backward. Or maybe your eyes are just tired. This was said to be where the truly wicked wept forever. Not punished with fire, just stuck in their own loops of what-ifs and too-lates. A quiet punishment, but a long one. You pause on a flat stone beside it. You don't cry, but the river offers the feeling anyway. You can take it if you want. You don't. Further on, the path leads to something completely different. Phlegethon, the river of fire. And yes, it lives up to the branding. It slithers through deep rock like molten lightning, lighting the walls orange and throwing shadows that dance far too convincingly. It doesn't burn the air, but it does warm it to an uncomfortable degree, like standing near a pizza oven that also judges your soul. In myth, this was where the damned burned, and where certain types of punishment took place for those who crossed lines that even the gods couldn't ignore. And here's the weird bit. In some accounts, phlegethon flows into the Styx, which is like mixing napalm and grudges. Historians still debate whether phlegethon was a literal vision of volcanic activity or just a poetic expression of divine anger. Either way, the fire hisses as you walk past. You don't make eye contact. You're getting used to that by now. Beyond the heat, the path cools again, and suddenly it feels like you've walked into a library that forgot what words were. Everything's quiet. Everything's still. You've reached Lethe, the river of forgetting. It glows faintly blue. Maybe. Or silver, depending on how you squint. Souls line up along its bank, drinking carefully from small clay cups passed down the line. One sip, and they forget everything. Who they were, what they did, why they arrived. In some versions, these souls are being prepped for reincarnation. In others, they're just being put to sleep forever. Scholars still debate whether Lethe represented a true path to rebirth or merely the final Mercia, forced fading of memory, so you don't carry your worst days forever. You kneel. You almost reach for a cup, but something inside you holds firm. You want to remember. You rise and walk on. The final river is the Styx again. Or rather, it's still haralooping through the underworld, like a sullen security guard, making its rounds. You understand now why the gods swore by it. It's not just because it's sacred. It's because it sees. This river remembers, and it never lies. You touch the water this time. Just a fingertip. It feels like a promise. The heavy kind. And then it's gone. You step away from the rivers, back onto a dry path, lined with carved stones and flickering torch brackets. You can still hear water behind you, but it's fading into the background, like a dream that doesn't want to be remembered too clearly. Up ahead, something growls, low, steady, like a warm engine. A giant shape stretches in the mist, yawns, and uncurls 3 heads. You've reached the real gatekeeper now. You take a step forward, and the mist peels away like a curtain that's had enough mystery for one day. There he is. Or, rather they are. Cerberus, the 3-headed dog of the underworld. Not a wolf. Not a bear. Not even a dragon in disguise, just a dog. A very, very large dog, with 3 equally expressive, equally saliva-laced heads, and paws the size of wagon wheels. Each head stares at you in turn, blinking slowly, ears swiveling, nostrils flaring with interest and mild suspicion. You don't need anyone to tell you. This is the final threshold. Past this point, you're no longer a visitor. The first head growls, low and a little sleepy, like a baritone purring engine. The second yawns wide enough to make you reconsider every decision you've ever made. The third tilts slightly, almost curious, as if wondering how chewy you might be. Cerberus is not a myth made to be metaphorical. He's a security system with fur. In myth, He guarded the gates of Hades, not to keep the living out, but the dead in. According to Hesiod, he was the child of Echidna, and Typhon making him the half-brother of every terrible creature you've ever had nightmares about. Fun family tree. Still, Cerberus was loyal. Dangerous. Yes, but only to those who broke the rules. Historians still argue whether his 3 heads symbolized the past, present, and future, or perhaps birth, youth, and age. Or maybe Hades just liked redundancy. You take another step forward. Slowly, Cerberus watches. All 3 heads, tracking your movement like synchronized drones. You hold your hands out, palms open. Not because you expect him to understand that as a universal sign of peace, but because it worked for Perseus. Or maybe it didn't. Hard to tell, with all the conflicting accounts. You're not carrying meat, a liar, or narcotic cake. You have no tricks. Just quiet confidence and the firm hope that you're not about to be turned into a chew toy, and miraculously lets you pass. One head gives a soft huff. The second sneezes. The third closes its eyes. You step lightly across the stone threshold, and just like that, you're inside the core of Hades' domain. The atmosphere changes immediately. No wind. No echoes. Just the stillness of completion. You're not here to fight. You're not here to escape. You're just here. Ahead stretches a vast hall, neither palace nor prison. Something in between. Souls pass you like gentle fog, drifting toward different fates, filing through different arches labeled not with signs, but with sensation. Some paths feel cold. Some warm. Others itch behind your eyes when you look too closely. To your left, a long table where parchment piles grow like mushrooms. Beside it, 3 figures in judicial robes argue quietly over a soul who doesn't appear present. These are the judges of the dead Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. Each a mortal, once, now administrators of eternity. They don't yell. They don't bang gavels. They deliberate. According to myth, Rhadamanthus judged souls from the east, Aeacus from the west, and Minos had the final say. This 3-tier system wasn't just bureaucracy, it reflected how even the afterlife needed regions. Voice. Process. Historians still debate whether these judges evolved from older Minoan rituals or were borrowed from Egyptian conceptions of weighing the soul. Either way, you get the sense that no bribe in the world would move them. You pass by them carefully. Minos pauses to glance at you, frowns slightly, then goes back to reviewing a scroll that seems to sigh when unrolled. Past the judges, the hall opens to a forked path. One leads to a gray, featureless expanse. One to a bright, blooming field. The third a downward tunnel, wrapped in heat and shadow. Choices. You take the neutral road first, and quickly understand what it means to settle. You've arrived at the asphodel fields. Souls wander here, endlessly, not in torment, not in bliss, just in repetition. They hum forgotten songs, walk in loops, rehearse conversations they meant to finish once. This is where most mortals end up, not bad enough for punishment, not remarkable enough for reward. It's the mythological version of May. Eternity in a waiting room with no magazines. And oddly, it's peaceful. Here's a quirky detail. In some ancient sources, these souls drank from Lethe before entering Asphodel. So they don't even remember who they were. They're shadows of memories of people. In other sources, they retain some identity, especially if their lives were full of small rituals and quiet devotion. Historians still argue whether Asphodel was meant to comfort the average Greek or subtly threaten them, live bravely or be forgotten forever. You pause in the fields for a while. The souls don't mind. One nods at you absently, then goes back to staring into the distance, like someone trying to remember their second-grade teacher's name. You press on, because the real decisions, the ones with fire, glory, and eternal paperwork still lie ahead. The grayness of the Asphodel fields thins behind you, like breath fading on a window pane. You walk with purpose now, though you're not entirely sure who assigned it. Still, there's momentum in your legs and a slight chill in the air that says, you haven't seen the worst of it yet. The path bends sharply and starts to descend, the walls pressing in as stone gives way to something darker obsidian, maybe, or fossilized shadow. You're heading toward Tartarus' cosmic basement, the place where the worst of the worst go to stay out of the way. It's not just hell light. It's deep hell. If Hades' realm is where souls are sorted and archived, Tartarus is the locked drawer you're not supposed to open. And naturally, you're opening it. The descent is longer than you expect. No stairs. No ladders. Just a slope that spirals like a snail shell made of regrets. The air grows heavier, hotter, not burning exactly, but charged like the moment before a lightning strike that never quite happens. As you descend, you notice strange etchings on the walls, not Greek, not human, patterns that seem to reconfigure every time you blink. You stop trying to read them before they start making sense. Eventually, you reach a wide clearing. No grass, no torches, just a pit in the center, rimmed with jagged stones and the faint hum of cosmic bad ideas. This is Tartarus. You don't step closer. You just peer in, and immediately regret it. Down there far, down something moves. Hooga, winged, maybe, or scaled, possibly both. The air shifts like a giant, exhaling in its sleep. You know who's down there, Cronus, father of Zeus, exiled after the Titanomachy. Along with other titans, they fell, and fell, and fell into Tartarus. In some myths, they're chained in darkness, gnawed by serpents made of time. In others, they've faded into something more abstract, more foundational, not quite dead, just part of the world's bones now. Historians still argue whether Tartarus was originally a deity itself, a primordial force. Like Gaia or Chaucer, simply a prison given mythic status. Either way, this isn't a place you visit so much as one you're banished to. Congratulations on being the exception. You move along the rim, slowly, carefully. The ground hums underfoot, like it's tuning itself to you. And then you start to notice the others, punished souls. Not the average regret-filled wanderers from Asphodel. These are the famous ones. Over there, Sisyphus, pushing his rock up a steep incline that resets every time he nears the top. You expect him to look miserable. But strangely, he seems focused, not happy, not broken, just in rhythm. Maybe he's made peace with the repetition. Or maybe he's just figured out a good leg workout. Camus would be proud. A little further, Tantalus, waist deep in a pool of water that recedes every time he bends to drink. With fruit hanging just out of reach. His punishment isn't fire or Chainsit's hope. Constant, mocking hope. That's somehow worse. You look at him, and for a moment, he looks back. Then the water vanishes again, and he sighs. Nearby, Ixion, strapped to a flaming wheel that spins forever. No explanation. Just constant motion. Supposedly, he tried to seduce Hera and got creative with cloud decoys. Now he's stuck in motion, sickness, purgatory. Historians still debate whether his punishment was moralistic or symbolic of cosmic hubris. Either way, it's not a ride you'd buy tickets for. And finally off to the side, something less flashy but deeply unsettling. Rows of nameless souls in personal hells. Some repeating arguments, others stuck in moments of shame. The punishments are weirdly specific. Embarrassing. Like someone curated them with care. You wonder if that's worse than flames and pitchforks. The air here buzzes with regret. But also a kind of justice. Not perfect. Not kind. But measured. This isn't chaos. It's structure. You don't linger. This place wasn't meant for your kind. The living don't belong in Tartarus. You retrace your steps. The spiral path rising gently beneath your feet, back into breathable air. Back into something that at least feels like fairness. And as the pit fades behind you, a new scent reaches your nose. Lilies. Rain. Maybe a hint of warm bread? You're not imagining it. You're approaching a different zone now. Not punishment. Not boredom, but reward. The Underworld's VIP section is just around the bend. You follow the scent of lilies and warmth until the air itself seems to exhale. Gone is the grit of Tartarus. The scratchy regret of Asphodel. Ahead, light starts to leak in golden and buttery. Like late afternoon sun filtered through heavy fig leaves. You're stepping into the Elysian fields now. And the difference is immediate. Even your feet feel lighter. Like the ground has given up, trying to hold you down. This is paradise. Or at least the ancient Greek version of it. The Elysium of poets and warriors. Philosophers and kings. Souls here don't shuffle. They stroll. No moaning. No loops. Just people who did great things in life. Now enjoying a retirement plan made of golden fields. Gentle breezes. And very smug birdsong. You pass under an arch of vines heavy with grapes. And a breeze tousles your hair like it's glad you're here. One soul tips their hat to you while reclining under a tree. Sipping something that smells like the answer to every rhetorical question. Another is sparring lazily with a partner. Their swords clinking like wind chimes. They laugh when they miss. The wounds, of course, don't exist. This is the realm where effort is optional. And everything tastes better than it did in life. According to the myths, Elysium was reserved for heroes and the truly virtuous, not your everyday decent folks, no. This was elite. Achilles is said to dwell here, although in the Odyssey, he famously tells Odysseus he'd rather be a living servant than a dead king. So, maybe he moved? Historians still debate whether Elysium was always part of the underworld or a later addition, influenced by ideas of personal reward and evolving ethics. Earlier myths placed it far to the west, at the edge of the earth, beyond the setting sun. Over time, it migrated geographically and spiritually into the afterlife map. One soul offers you a fig, which you politely decline because you're 90% sure eating anything here would end with a permanent address change. They nod in understanding. It's a common mistake. Pomegranates. Figs. Ambrosia Greek afterlife snacks are suspiciously binding. You pause at a fountain that's not bubbling with water, but with some kind of stardust mist. A few souls dip their hands into it and glow for a moment before continuing their day. You try to count how many people are here. You can't. The landscape folds in ways your eyes weren't built for somehow. Both a quiet village and a never-ending horizon. It's not designed for logic. It's designed for peace. There's a soft music drifting from some hair harps, panpipes, the occasional out-of-tune lyre. It sounds like the dream version of a playlist meant to make you feel nostalgic for things you've never lived. It works. You sit down in the grass and let your hand trail through the blades. They feel real, cool, slightly ticklish. The ground here doesn't press back against your weight, it supports you. You're not sinking. You're being held, and yet, despite the serenity, you notice something odd. Some of the souls look contemplative, not bored, not sad, just thoughtful, like they're remembering something important, or maybe considering something even better. Because, yes, there's another level. Whispers tell of a place beyond even Elysium, the Isles of the Blessed, accessible only to those who lived righteous lives, not once, but 3 times, each time being judged worthy. It's the triple gold medal of the afterlife. Reincarnated, retested, and rewarded again. It's like spiritual frequent flyer miles with no blackout dates. You hear murmurs about how one gets there. Some say, you must choose to return to the world, live again, suffer again, and do it all over without losing your virtue. Others suggest you have to ask, but that asking proves you aren't ready. Classic. Catch-22. Historians still argue whether the Isles were just a poetic invention, a way to comfort those who feared even paradise would grow dull. The Greeks weren't big on eternal perfection. They wanted stakes, stories, challenges, even in death. They couldn't quite commit to endless contentment without adding a layer of optional adversity. You rise. Elysium is beautiful. But you're not done walking. The breeze nudges your back gently. Time to explore the mythic cul-de-sac where the overachievers hang out. You follow the Golden Road. Not because you've earned it, but because you're curious what lies at the very end of myth. The Golden Road curves like a question mark drawn by someone who forgot the answer. You follow it as the sun-brushed hills of Elysium begin to soften and blur. The air thins slightly, not in a suffocating way, but more like altitude, like you're leaving the stage and walking into the rafters of heaven's theater. No one stops you. No gates. No guards. Just the feeling that wherever you're going, very few have gone before. Then, it opens before you, a shimmering coastline, impossibly still. The waves don't crash. They exhale. Palm trees sway without wind. And stretching out from the edge of a pale sandbar, you see them, the Isles of the Blessed. Not large. Not ostentatious. Just distant. Glowing islands that hum with quiet pride. No applause. No fanfare. Just perfection with its shoes off. You don't step into a boat. The path just continues. Stone underfoot, giving way to cool water that doesn't wet your feet. It's more like walking through memory liquid but light. Substantial, but not sticky. As you cross the shallows, you spot others far ahead, a poet scribbling in midair. A warrior, sparring with their own shadow. A farmer humming to crops that grow faster when sung to. The Isles are reserved for the twice reborn and thrice excellent. According to myth, you must live a virtuous life. To be reborn. Repeat the whole process 2 more times, and still emerge good enough to make the celestial honor roll. It's a tall order. Only a few names appear consistently on the roster. Cadmus, Peleu, Harmonia, maybe Heracles, depending on which version you follow. You step onto the shore. No welcome party. Just a feeling in your chest like all the tension you didn't realize you were holding just releases. This is a place that's earned, not granted. And while you didn't earn it, you're allowed a peek. That's more than most. The grass here is different from Elysium. Softer, less idealized, more real. The breeze carries hints of ocean salt, warm fig, and old leather-bound books. Everything here feels handmade. Nothing mass-produced by divine decree. A soul passes you carrying a clay pot filled with something that smells suspiciously like honey, wine, and ambition. They nod. Keep walking. You sit beneath a tree shaped like a question you forgot to ask. The shade is perfect, not cold. Not dark. Just enough to make your eyes rest. There are no bugs. No noisy. Just the low pulse of eternal satisfaction. But the strangest part? Some of the souls look like they miss something. Not because they're unhappy, but because even perfection can't replace purpose. There are whispers that souls here sometimes choose to leave. Reincarnate again. Try one more time to do something in the world of the living. Maybe help. Maybe fail. But do. Historians still debate whether the Isles were aspirational theology or symbolic commentary lists about reward. More about persistence. Maybe ancient Greeks understood what modern thinkers keep relearning, that the quest for meaning doesn't end. Even after death, that paradise without growth eventually becomes its own kind of purgatory. You stay a little longer, breathing in the clarity. It's like your brain is being scrubbed with silk. You could fall asleep right here and wake up still dreaming. But the road continues. It always does. You rise. Because curiosity, like a good myth, never rests for long. You're ready now to walk among the punished, once more not in Tartarus, but just on the edge, where legendary fates serve as cautionary bedtime tales for immortals. You step off the isle, and the light behind you doesn't dim. It simply waits. The next figures you'll meet are not lucky, not heroic. They are complicated and very bad at exits. You step off the shore, and the ground beneath you shifts again, no longer soft and inviting, but firm, echoing slightly like an old temple floor swept clean by centuries of silence. The warmth of the Isles of the Blessed fades from your skin, replaced by a faint electric chill. It isn't unpleasant. It's just a reminder that comfort was a brief detour. Not the standard here. You're back in the main corridors of the underworld now. But this time, you're heading toward those mythic figures whose legacies didn't quite fit the hero mold. They didn't rule kingdoms or slay monsters. They became the stories people warned each other about. The first of them waits on a cracked pedestal in a shadowed alcove, fidgeting, like a man who knows he's being watched. Tiresias, the blind prophet of Thebes, not exactly punished, but definitely caught in the cosmic crossfire more often than he deserved. You've heard of him, the man who lived as both man and woman, who was struck blind by the gods, and compensated with the gift of foresight, or possibly cursed with it. The myths vary. Tiresias sits quietly now, speaking aloud to no one in particular. His voice is soft, but every word lands with the precision of prophecy. A traveler will arrive who seeks to understand but fears the answer. You freeze. He doesn't turn. Doesn't need to. The blind always see too much down here. The strange thing about Tiresias isn't his visions. It's how often he's right. He told Oedipus the truth. He warned Creon. He even gave Odysseus advice from beyond the grave. Historians still argue whether his dual-gender transformation made him a shamanic archetype or a narrative trick to explore divine injustice. Either way, Tiresias isn't here for redemption. He's just here, watching, predicting, waiting to be asked something you're not ready to hear. You pass him carefully, resisting the urge to ask anything too personal. Next up, Orpheus. He's easy to spot. Sitting beside a black river with a lyre in his lap and a gaze locked permanently on nothing. He strums once. The note echoes longer than it should. Then he stops, sighs, and strums again. You know the story. He came here willingly, played music so heartbreakingly beautiful that even Hades and Persephone allowed him to retrieve his lost love. Euridice. There was just one catch. He couldn't look back until they'd both reached the surface. Spoiler alert, looked, and she vanished. Again, some say he dooted. Some say he couldn't resist. Others claim the gods set him up to fail. Because who gives a condition like don't look back to a man whose entire identity is feelings? You watch him for a moment. His song now is quieter, incomplete, like a sentence that ends in a shrug. Orpheus isn't punished, but he isn't forgiven. Either, he's just stuck on repeat. A walking reminder that even divine favors come with fine print. You move on. Not far from the river, you pass a woman sitting under a silver olive tree, her fingers weaving something invisible in the air. Threads shimmer around her, forming patterns only she understands. This is Arachnith, the mortal weaver who challenged Athena and, depending on the version, either insulted the gods or just embarrassed them by being too talented. Her punishment? Transformed into a spider. The very first. If you believe the story, now, in the underworld, she weaves ghost webs. Note, silk. Memory. You pause to admire the patterns. Scenes from myths. Battles. Lovers. Betrayals. But woven upside down, reversed, critical, satirical. Even if Athena's tapestries were propaganda, Arachnes are political cartoons. Historians still debate whether the Arachne story was a warning against arrogance or a veiled critique of how women's brilliance got punished more than praised. Either way, she's not apologizing. Her fingers keep weaving. And when you step too close, the threads twitch slightly as if daring you to contradict her. You take the hint. Back away. The last soul in this strange side gallery is perhaps the most haunting. She stands alone, barefoot, in a garden where no fruit grows. Her dress is ash, her hair wild. She doesn't see you. She's locked in her own moment. This is Medea, wife of Jason, sorceress, granddaughter of Helios, accused of murder, accused of madness, celebrated, I feared, pitied, and rewritten across centuries. One myth makes her a victim, another makes her a monster. The truth is buried somewhere between love and vengeance. Down here, she doesn't speak, but her presence says enough. You feel it a weight, an ache, a spark of heat behind your eyes. Not hate, not grief, just the raw, unedited power of a woman history never managed to simplify. You don't stay long. Some souls in the underworld fade. Some linger, and some burn so brightly that even death treats them carefully. You exit the gallery of the complicated and the cursed. Their stories aren't over, but yours must keep moving. You have an appointment at a throne, and its occupant is ready. You're back on the main path now, and it's finally leading you to him, the figure whose name the underworld carries, but who rarely bothers with visitors. The path is clean here, smoother than you expect. The mist lifts just slightly, and for the first time since you crossed the Acheron, the space around you feels do you put this politely, managed, like someone's been keeping it organized? There are no torches on the walls here. No echoes. Just a constant, low pulse. You feel it more in your bones than in your ears. And then you see him, Adus. Not horned, not red-skinned, no trident, no dramatic throne of bones. Just a quiet, stately figure sitting on a block of polished black stone, flanked by silence, surrounded by ledgers that flutter gently without wind. His robe isn't grand. It's practical, dark, folded perfectly. His beard is trimmed. His gaze firm, not cruel. Not warm. Just very, very tired. Like a man who knows every story before it starts and files every ending away in a drawer with someone else's name on it. This is the god of the dead, not the god of death. A subtle but crucial distinction. Hades doesn't kill you. He just receives your paperwork when someone else does. And from the look of it, business is brisk. He looks up, doesn't smile, but doesn't frown either. You are acknowledged. And weirdly, that's enough. Unlike the sky-dwelling gods who demand sacrifices, songs, or statues, Hades has no interest in flattery. In fact, the ancient Greeks didn't even say his name lightly. They called him Pluton, the wealthy one, because all wealth comes from below, from the earth, from what's buried, not just bodies, minerals, treasures, roots. He is both landlord and lockbox. You take a step closer. He does not invite you, but he also doesn't vanish. His throne pulses slightly, not with magic, with order. This entire place runs because he shows up to work. You can tell. No chaos. No rebellion. Even the monsters down here clock in and out. You glance at the space beside him. And, yes, there she is. Persephone. Tall, pale, eyes like spring fighting with autumn. She doesn't sit. She stands, hands clasped. Not as a queen forced into a role, but as someone who knows exactly what she signed up for. This, of course, is the famous marriage. Abduction. If you believe the first draft, strategic alliance. If you trust the later edits, scholars still argue whether Persephone was a victim of divine kidnapping or a consenting, cunning player in her own myth. After all, it's her decision to eat the pomegranate seeds that binds her here for part of every year. 6 seeds. 6 months. Autumn and winter her time in the underworld. Spring and summer her return to her mother. Demeter. And the waking world. You feel the shift in their presence. It's not love. Exactly. Not passion. It's partnership. Mutual understanding. A balance struck beneath the surface of all things. She governs with him. Not beside him. Not beneath. You understand now why no other gods hang out down here. This place isn't for them. It's theirs, and they run it with the kind of efficiency Olympus never quite managed. Persephone nods to Yuan sand for a moment. You feel that cool flush of fresh earth, like the first seed planted in soft soil. Not death, not mourning, just rest. And that might be the most subversive part of all this. The underworld isn't terrifying because it's cruel. It's terrifying because it's so calm, so final. You thank them without speaking, and you walk away slowly, giving them back their quiet. The halls narrow again. Less organized now. Less manicured. The further you walk, the more you realize you're approaching the deeper levels of divine HR, the ones with 3 pairs of eyes, bat wings, and very sharp voices. Time to meet the compliance department. The air shifts again, tingling now with a faint ozone charge, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm but down here. Of course, the clouds are metaphorical, and the lightning comes with rules. You walk on, and the path subtly transforms beneath your feet from polished stone to something coarser, lined with deep grooves like claws or pens, or maybe both have passed this way. You're entering a part of the underworld governed less by empathy and more by enforcement, and then you hear them. A rustle of feathers, a flurry of voices, half whisper, half scream. Out of the gloom step the Erinyes, also known as the Furies. There are 3 of them, Alecto, Megar, and Tisiphone, and they do not smile. They are not here for poetic symbolism. They are, quite literally, the afterlife's rage-fueled customer service, but instead of holding you on the line, they hold you to account. Their eyes are unblinking. Their hair, a writhing tangle of serpents and shadow. Their hands gripping whips woven from Oathbreaker's breath. You've read about them, but up close, they don't match the drawings. They're not monsters. They're inevitable. Born from the blood of Uranus, when he was well. Let's just say dismantled by Cronus. The Furies are older than Olympus, older than rules. They are justice in its rawest form, especially when that justice slips into vengeance. They punish those crimes that society can't always reach: unpunished murder, betrayal of kin, lies under sacred oath, things that rot the soul if left unchecked, things no mortal jury can quite fix. They circle you en senat because you're guilty, but because they check everyone. Standard protocol. You meet Tisophone's gaze. She doesn't speak, but you feel it, a silent background scan of your worst thoughts, your oldest grudges. For the time you told a lie and then told yourself it wasn't one, she lets it pass. Barely. Alecto flicks a hand, and a scroll materializes mid-air. It rolls open with a snap, unfurling a list of names, so long it starts to curl against itself. You glimpse a few entries: Orestes, Oedipus, Clytemnestra, classic Greek tragedy, VIPs. You watch as the Furies rejudge them over and over. They don't change the outcome, they reaffirm it. Every sentence down here has weight, and the Furies make sure it stays heavy. You wonder who judges the Furies? Historians still debate whether they were worshipped out of fear or respect. The Athenians built a shrine for them, called them the Eumenides the Kindly Onesson, a classic ancient attempt at reverse psychology. It's like naming your wasp infestation the gentle floaties. You step carefully as you move past them. They don't follow. Their wings fold back, their eyes close. Their attention shifts to the next misdeed, approaching from some corner of memory. Further down the corridor, you notice that the walls are covered in inscriptions carved into the very rock, with tools that must have been forged in guilt and sharpened on secrets. These are not declarations or histories. They're confessions. Thousands of them, some etched hastily, others drawn with the deliberate, almost ceremonial precision of someone finally owning up. And then you hear a whisper, not from a Fury, but from a voice behind a veil. You step closer and realize you're in the presence of Nemesis. Not a Fury, but close. Nemesis isn't punishment. She's balance, the goddess of retribution. Where the Furies handle moral and legal violations, Nemesis deals with cosmic fairness, too much joy, too much power, too much hubris. And she appears to correct the scales. She doesn't move, just stands, cloaked in a robe that shifts between silver and storm cloud. In one hand, a bridle. In the other, a wheel. She looks at you, and again you're measured. Not judged, but weighed. Her existence answers one of those philosophical questions we pretend not to ask. What keeps the mighty in check when no one else can? You glance at the wheel, spinning slowly, perpetually. The ancients believed Nemesis rode a chariot pulled by griffins, chasing those whose luck outpaced their humility. She's not here to destroy, just to remind. You can almost hear her whisper it, nothing stays up forever. Huh. You bow slightly, not because she demands it, but because it feels like the smart thing to do, and then, just like that, she vanishes. Balance restored. You take a breath. Your next steps will take you out of divine HR and into the archives of time itself, where memory is kept, where forgetting is a choice, and where the rivers speak louder than gods. The silence after the Furies is sharp, not empty, just clarified. Like everything unnecessary has been shaved off the world. You feel lighter and heavier at the same time. Your path now leads into the heart of the underworld's memory. Not judgment. Not punishment. Reflection. Ahead. A soft glow pulses in the dark like a lighthouse for souls who forgot what they came here to forget. This is the realm of the Lethetha River of Forgetting. You've heard about it in whispers and half-remembered myths, that if you drink from it, your memories slide away like melting wax. That before reincarnation, every soul drinks deep, so their new life isn't polluted with regret. But standing here now, at the river's edge, it's not so much water as it is absence. The current doesn't babble or rush. It hushes, a slow, silver drift that shimmers with fragments of things, lost snippets of lullabies, the feel of your mother's coat, the name of your first heartbreak. A shade sits nearby, cupping the water carefully, letting it pass through their fingers without swallowing. You ask why. They don't answer with words. Just a shrug that says, "I'm not sure I'm ready to forget." That seems to be a common affliction Hera souls on the edge, torn between the peace of not remembering and the identity that only memory provides. You walk along the bank, watching people forget themselves in stages, some slowly, some all at once. One soul starts to hum a tune, forgets the middle, then the beginning, then stops. Their face relaxes. The burden is gone, but so is something else. Historians still argue whether the myth of Lethe was meant to explain reincarnation, offer hope, or warn against spiritual amnesia. Some even believe it's symbolic of how people move on from grief forgetting, not because they want to, but because they have to in order to function. Further down the stream, you see a peculiar figure standing waist-deep in the river. This is Mnemosynethi, tightness of memory, mother of the muses, and ironically Lethe's cosmic counterweight. She watches the waters of forgetfulness with no judgment, just a soft curiosity. According to some traditions, there's a second spring hidden deep in Hades' realm named after her. If you drink from her waters, you remember everything, not just your life. All lives. Everything. Sounds exhausting. Honestly, a few philosophical cults believed the enlightened could skip Lethe and go straight to Mnemosyne's spring. That remembering fully, completely, was the path to transcendence. Of course, remembering everything also means remembering every mistake, every heartbreak, every toothache and political debate. You're not sure that's enlightenment. Might just be masochism. You move on, drifting away from the river and into a strange grove where the trees lean toward you not for sunlight, which doesn't exist here. But like they're listening, and they are, this is the memory orchard, a place whispered about in the Orphic hymns. Some say souls who resist Lethe come here instead, to store their memories in fruit. Each fig or pear or olive holds one person's truth, sealed away in mythic organic packaging. You reach for one just gently and feel a pulse, a flash of a memory, not yours, a horse running across a field, laughter, a flash of battle, a varm cloak. It slips away before you can hold on to it. The tree sways, pleased. Even the underworld has backups. Further ahead, a group of robed figures sit in a circle, heads bowed, murmuring softly to each other. Not prayers, not chants, just stories. Oral history being passed down among the dead. The Greeks believed that memory wasn't just an individual act, it was a collective one. That remembering kept you alive. And if enough people forgot you, well, that was real death. One figure glances up and points behind you. You turn, and there it is. A pool. Flat, black, still as polished obsidian. This is not Lethe. This is where truth sinks, where secrets are kept when no one's left to carry them. You approach, and the surface ripples slightly. You see something. Maybe a memory of yours. Maybe someone else's. It fades before you can be sure. But the feeling lingers melancholy, soft-edged, and then a question forms in your head. One that seems to come from the pool itself. What would you give up to forget? What would you sacrifice to remember? You don't answer, not because you don't know, but because it's not your turn to drink, not yet. You step back, and the water settles. The next passage ahead grows colder, sharper. You're done with memory. You're headed for judgment, and there are scales waiting that don't care how charming your story is. The warmth of memory fades behind you like breath on glass. And now the underworld begins to tighten. The walls draw closer. The ceiling lowers. Your steps echo louder. Despite the hush that surrounds everything, it's not fear. Exactly, anticipation. This is where souls stand trial. Not in chaos, not in fire, but in the dim, echoing stillness of ancient bureaucracy. Welcome to the Court of the Dead. You round a bend and find 3 judges seated on stone thrones, each carved from a different kind of rock obsidian. Limestone and granite-like. Even their furniture is calibrated for cosmic impartiality. These are Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, trio of former kings turned underworld magistrates. You'd think death would let you retire. Not for these guys. Each one judges a different kind of soul. Aeacus handles Europeans, mostly Greeks. Rhadamanthus, the Asiatics. Minos, he's the final word. The appeals court. The man with the last N. The strange thing is how quiet it is. No gavel, no shouting, no weeping, just a kind of ambient pressure. Like the air has opinions, you watch as one soul stands before them, translucent and trembling, recounting a life lived in half-steps and hesitant choices. The judges listen. Occasionally, one of them tilts their head. They don't smile. They don't scowl. They just know, and then, without a word, they point. The soul is gently swept away, not by chains or flames, but by a breeze that feels like paperwork being filed. Next, you realize this isn't about punishment. It's about placement. Where does your story go? What part of eternity fits your vibe? The Greeks didn't imagine the afterlife as strictly moralistic. It was more like divine sorting. Were you brave? Were you wise? Were you may? Historians still debate how seriously everyday Greeks believed in this post-mortem process. Was it literal? Symbolic? A metaphor for the societal aftershocks of reputation? The mythmakers rarely agreed, but that didn't stop them from writing flowcharts for eternity. You inch closer and notice a strange scale floating to the side of the room. Its pan suspended by threads of thought. Not gold, not metal, just consequence. It's unclear what weighs. More a good deed done out of love or a mistake made with honest regret. Somewhere nearby, an assistant scribes notes with a pen that bleeds light instead of ink. They glance at you, but don't pause. They've seen it all. You get the sense they've been transcribing decisions since the first soul tripped into the afterlife by mistake. You spot a small altar off to one side, unattended. On it sit tokens, not bribes, but offerings: a broken necklace, a child's drawing, a stone with a name scratched into it, symbols left by the living in the hopes of mercy. It's unclear whether they work, but they're beautiful. A door opens with no sound. You walk through. On the other side, a vast room lined with shelves that spiral upward into blackness. Thousands, maybe millions of jars. Scrolls. Fragments of pottery. This is the archive of the lived. Every soul's judgment is recorded, filed, preserved, not for reference, for witness. You reach out to one scroll, and it unfurls with a sigh. It tells the story of a man who died anonymously, but saved a stranger once, without ever learning their name. The judges ruled him average. The archive calls him extraordinary. You wonder if every file in here argues with its verdict just a little. A soft rustle behind you. Another soul has entered. They're trembling, but they stand tall. They know their story, and they're ready to hear how it's been interpreted. That's the terrifying part. Really. Not the crimes, not the punishment. The interpretation, the idea that everything you did, every kindness, every cruelty is now being organized, summarized, and possibly footnoted. And someone else gets the final say. You leave the archives behind. There's nothing more to see here, just an endless row of what-ifs. The next corridor glows red, not hellfire, not rage, just the heat of desire. You're headed to meet the kinds of souls who couldn't stop wanting, and the punishments they inspired. The corridor narrows, but the heat rises. Not the blistering inferno of fire and brimstone. This isn't that kind of mythology, but a more intimate warmth. The kind that clings to the skin like memory. You start to feel flushed, though the air hasn't thickened. It's emotional heat, the kind that desire leaves behind when the wanting never stops. Ahead lies a chamber veined with molten red light, flickering not from flames, but from within the walls themselves, as though the stone remembers passion. Welcome to the domain of the unrestrained, of those who lived for appetite, ambition, obsession, of souls who burned too brightly, too selfishly, too long. You enter a vaulted space carved into Curvezno, harsh corners here. Statues lean in on every wall, frozen mid-embrace, mid-reach, mid-gasp. You quickly realize they're not decorative. These are cautionary monuments, preserved mid-yearning. Some reach for lovers, others for thrones. One is grasping upward toward an imagined spotlight. Eyes hollow with need. This is the museum of unmet longing, and at the center? Tantalus. He stands waist deep in a pool that recedes the moment he bends to drink. Above his head, fruit hangs just out of reach, lifting higher each time he stretches. It's cartoonish in concept, comedic, even until you see the way he trembles, not from thirst or hunger, but from knowing he will never stop reaching. Ever. Tantalus was once a king, reich, favored, invited to dine with the gods. Then, he tried to serve his own son as stew at a divine banquet. As you, though, the gods were not amused. Now he's here, cursed to crave what he can never have. It's from his name we get the word tantalize. You suddenly realize how often we describe pain using his kind of suffering, always, almost, never quite. You step around him, carefully. Nearby, another figure spins endlessly. Her hair whips like rope, her eyes fixed on something only she can see. This is Ixion, the man who tried to seduce Hera and ended up chained to a fiery, spinning wheel, forever, like a hamster wheel, but with more guilt and less cardio. You start to notice a theme. Punishments here are shaped like the desires that led to them. Not ironic. Just, precise, tailored. Historians still argue whether these myths were moral instruction or just good storytelling. After all, Greek gods weren't exactly paragons of restraint themselves. Zeus turned into more animals than a Disney villain, and Aphrodite's love life had more plot twists than a telenovela. But mortals? Mortals had to pay the price. You pass a shallow pit and hear the clatter of dice. Peering in, you see Palamedes, betrayed in the Trojan War, accused unjustly, killed dishonorably. Some myths say his spirit became obsessed with revenge, whispering strategies to generals in their dreams, nudging wars forward so that nobody could rest, not even in peace. Next, you find Sisyphus. And yes, he's here, pushing the rock. Up, up. And every time you know how this goes, it rolls back down. But here's the strange part. He doesn't look as miserable as you expect. Tired. Yes, but determined. Maybe even amused. Albert Camus, the French philosopher, famously said, "We must imagine Sisyphus happy, that his struggle gives him purpose, that the act of pushing is a kind of resistance." Historians and philosophers still debate whether his punishment was cruelty or commentary. You pause and watch the boulder descend once more. It doesn't crash, just rolls. Sisyphus wipes his brow, places his hands on the stone again, and gives you a nod, as if to say, "Well, what else were you expecting?" And that's the rub of it. These souls aren't screaming. They're not being flayed or torched. They're just repeating, doing the thing they couldn't stop doing in life. Wanting, reaching, planning, striving. It makes you wonder, are they being punished, or are they just being honest? You exit the chamber, and the heat fades, replaced by something more metallic, colder, sharper. You're heading next into the deepest vaults, where the worst crimes echo forever, and the myths stop being poetic. Your footfalls grow heavier now, not from exhaustion, but from the quiet gravity of where you're going. The walls here narrow once more, chiseled not by hand, but by repetition, so Many souls have shuffled through this way that the stone has worn into grooves. The air tastes of iron and silence. You're descending into Tartarus now, not a neighborhood. Not a punishment. A principle. This isn't where people go because they were bad. It's where immortals are locked away when they're too dangerous to destroy. And the first thing you feel is how far from everything else you now are. The gods barely acknowledge this place exists. It's so deep beneath Hades that it makes the underworld look like a treehouse. You pass the gate. It doesn't creak or swing. It just accepts your presence. And then you see him, towering, coiled in rusted chains that shimmer with paradox, simultaneously ancient and unbreakable. Cronus, yes, that Cronus. King of the Titans, father of Zeus, the one who swallowed his own children to keep them from overthrowing him, which, spoiler alert, didn't work. Zeus got out, rallied his siblings, and kicked Dad down here into eternal exile. Cronus doesn't move much anymore, but his eyes follow you. There's no hatred there, just an old, slow burn, like the embers of an ancient star. Maybe regret, maybe boredom. Hard to tell when your punishment is measured in millennia. He was once time itself. Remember. And now, time has forgotten him. You don't linger. The weight of him is too much. Next comes Iapetus, another Titan, father of Prometheus, also imprisoned. You spot him curled near a river of pitch, mumbling equations. He was once called the Piercer, associated with mortal life and death. Now he counts seconds like a prisoner, carving lines on a wall. No one responds. And then, deeper still, the space widens suddenly, not because it wants to, but because something had to be locked in a pit big enough to hold it. You squint through the gloom and spot what at first looks like smoke. Then movement. Then eyes. So many eyes. This is Typhon, the monster of monsters, son of Gaia and Tartarus himself. His breath scorched mountains. His wings shadowed cities. He once challenged Zeus and nearly won. Now, he sleeps, coiled in chains, made from the sinews of Olympus itself. His body stretches through caverns and cracks you can't even see. His dreams stir winds up top. His nightmares cause earthquakes. Some say when he stirs, volcanoes answer. Historians still argue whether Typhon represents the ultimate chaos, or just the Greeks' attempt to embody all fears in one place. His myth reads like a cosmic panic attack lava. Serpents, thunder, screaming, and then, suddenly, silence. But it's not safe silence. It's watchful, the kind of hush a zoo has when the tiger enclosure locks barely. You step quietly around the edges of the pit, and your feet crunch on something. You look down. Not bones. Not ash. Feathers. Black. Iridescent feathers that shimmer faintly. You're not alone. And that's when you see her, a figure perched above the pit on a jagged column, dressed in rags of shadow, wings hunched, eyes like burning pits of grief and fury. Nyx, the primordial goddess of night. Older than the Titans, older than chaos. So powerful even Zeus tiptoes around her. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. The fact that she's here, Watching Tartarus means this place isn't just punishment. It's containment, supervision, insurance, a divina maximum security. And yet, it still breathes. You feel it. A low, pulsing throb beneath your feet. Not footsteps. Not magic. Just pressure. This isn't hell. This is the storage room for things too powerful to exist, and you're just visiting. Time to go. You leave Tartarus behind. I'm grateful that the gate closes, not with a slam, but with a whisper. A reminder. We're still here. Oh, and up ahead? The final boundary, the place even souls don't come back from. Where peace stops pretending to be poetic and becomes a choice. The climb out of Tartarus isn't steep, it's slow. Each step carries the weight of what you've seen. Monsters slumbering. The void barely held shut by myth and memory. The light returns in slivers now. Not warm, but clinical. The kind you get in ancient temples or hospital hallways. It's not meant to comfort. It's meant to clarify. You're getting close to the edge, the outer limit of the underworld, where the living world begins to fray and eternity becomes negotiable. You walk without company now, which feels odd. No judges. No monsters. No cryptic goddesses lounging on shadows. Just you. And the sound of water. Again. But this time, it isn't Lethe, where memory fades. Or sticks. Where oaths rot. This is the river Eridanos. A stream that appears in only the strangest versions of the myth. Some say it carries amber tears, shed by mourning nymphs. Others believe it leads to a place beyond even death, something that's not rebirth. Not paradise. But a kind of cancellation. Total erasure. Not scary. Just blank. You don't approach it. The ground around it buzzes with quiet warnings. Some thresholds aren't meant to be crossed just because they exist. You keep moving. The terrain flattens. The air becomes sharper. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, just reminds you you're real. Ahead lies the Asphodel Meadows, the largest region of the underworld, and the most populated. No fire. No chains. No golden fields or music. Just endless rows of pale gray grass, rustling under a breeze that has no origin. This is where the average soul ends up. Not wicked. Not heroic. Just ordinary. The people here drift. Not in pain. Not in joy. Just in motion. Souls talk. But you can't hear them. Their voices don't carry. Occasionally someone laughs. But it's soft. Detached. Like they remembered the shape of a joke, but not the punchline. Some wear the vague outline of the faces they had in life. Others are featureless. Not by magic. But because they've let go of who they were. They are here. They exist. But barely. The ancient Greeks didn't see this as a punishment. More like a conclusion. You lived. You died. You weren't evil. You weren't legendary. So you get a quiet field and eternal wandering. It's the cosmic equivalent of being put on hold forever. But at least the music isn't annoying. There's a tree in the middle of it all. Not a grand, gnarled landmark. Just a slightly taller ash tree. Pale as bone. Someone has carved names into it. Not in Greek. not in any known script, just marks. Someone wanted to be remembered. Whether the tree does or not is another matter. One figure stands at the base, not moving. You can't tell if they're reading or forgetting. Both are possible here. You walk on. Past souls, mid-thought, mid-walk, mid-forget. You start to notice that even here, tiny rituals have emerged. Some gather pebbles and sort them into shapes. Others hum together once a day at what feels like dusk. A few build little mounds of earth, only to flatten them the next hour. Not meaningful. Exactly. Just repetition. It gives them shape. Some philosophers argue that the asphodel meadows were never about reward or punishment, but instead an honest acknowledgement that most lives are somewhere in the middle, neither wicked nor worthy of legend. And that's okay, but then you spot something strange. A small path branching off the main field. Faint, but unmistakably different. It's been walked before, not many times, but enough. And curiously, the grass around it seems a little greener. You step onto it. It leads not to a gate, not to a throne, but to a stone bench beside a still pool. The surface reflects your face with eerie accuracy, like it knows the parts of you forgot to bring along. And sitting beside it is a man dressed like a beggar, but holding a staff carved with constellations. He looks at you. Then he blinks slowly. You're not lost, he says. You're just visiting. You don't answer. You don't need to. He gestures to the path ahead. There's one last region left, and it's not for souls. It's for decisions. You leave the quiet behind. The meadows stretch out endlessly behind your shoulder like a story that doesn't know how to end. And ahead, the path changes not dramatically, but perceptibly. The dirt grows darker. Not from soot or ash, but like it's been touched by moonlight too many times. The air carries no smell, and the silence here is intentional. Not passive like before. It's watching you. This is not a place most myths bother to describe. It doesn't belong to gods or monsters, or even to memory. It belongs to choice. The Greeks called it the plane of decision, a liminal space where souls that haven't yet been sorted or that chose not to ballinger, hovering between destinations. You pass a series of stone markers, each one shaped like a doorway, but with nothing behind it. Some are open, some are sealed. One is cracked down the middle. You notice something odd. Your footsteps no longer echo. Sound is being absorbed. Like the land itself doesn't want to influence you. The ancient poets rarely mentioned this place. And when they did, it was in riddles. A shadowed path, a space where even Hades looks away. You're not alone here. Either. Shadows drift. Slower than the meadows. More thoughtful. Some sit. Some stare into nothing. A few pace like they're rehearsing a speech. These are the souls who couldn't or wouldn't accept the judgment handed to them. Some waited too long to drink from Lethe. Others refused to forget. One or two, you sense, are still waiting for someone they loved to join them before they choose. There are statues here. Two. Not of heroes or gods but of moments. One shows a woman turning away from a goblet. Another depicts a man with a foot in two different directions. A third shows nothing at all, just a blank plinth. as if the decision was never made. You pass by a pool surrounded by 7 torches. Some lit, some flickering. No two burn the same. This is the pond of hesitation, a place for souls to whisper their choices into water. You don't speak, but something in the pool shifts anyway. Maybe it heard the question you haven't said aloud. Philosophers still argue whether the Greeks meant for this place to be literal, or if it was just metaphor, the final threshold between story and silence. But standing here, you start to believe that every myth needs a space like this. Not dramatic, not moralistic, just quiet, honest, a hallway between endings. You walk on, and then, without fanfare, you see it. A fork, not a grand divine crossroad, just a simple split. Left leads back toward Lethe. Eventually, Reinkarnation, a second or third or 10th chance. Right leads to final rest. Oblivion, maybe, or something beyond names. There are no signs, no voices telling you what to do. Just the hum of your own thoughts, and the sense that this not the monsters, not the thrones or rivers, the most sacred part of the underworld, the part that asks, do you want to begin again? You stand still for a while, not because you're confused, but because standing still feels allowed here. Then, behind you, a new path begins to glow, one neither left nor right. A return. You realize you're not dead. You don't have to choose. You're just a visitor, a dreamer, a traveler passing through someone else's eternity. The path opens wider, welcoming you back toward the world of breath and clocks and forgetfulness. You've seen the depths, the judgments, the regrets, the wonders. And you're carrying something back, not knowledge. Exactly. Just perspective. You turn away from the fork. You start walking, and as you do, the underworld begins to soften. The path smooths beneath your feet now, like it's grateful you've made it this far, without trying to claim anything. You've touched memory and forgetting, stood before judges and monsters, walked through meadows and stared into the void. And yet, no soul has clung to you. No god has barred your path. You're not part of the underworld. You're a thread weaving through its tapestry, gently pulled but never tied in. And now, as the shadows begin to lift not vanish, just soften you, feel a subtle shift in your own sense of self. You've been watching. Now something is watching you. You're nearing Elysium, not the sparkly paradise of modern imagination. No harp music, no fluffy clouds, just a different kind of stillness, the kind that hums with contentment. A wide plain opens before you, kissed with golden light that comes from nowhere in particular. The grass is a soft blue-green, not quite earthly. The trees bloom with fruit, but none of it overripe. No one hurries. No one waits. The souls here smile, not because they're euphoric, but because they are settled. Elysium wasn't for everyone. Originally, it was the resting place of heroes, of those chosen by the gods. Later myths opened it up a bit, made it more egalitarian souls who lived righteous. Noble lives could earn a spot, but no matter the version, it's always been the final home for the deserving. That's the catch. Of course, someone else decides if you deserve it. Historians still debate whether Elysium was meant to be heaven or just a reward system built to keep mortals inspired. Some say it was propaganda. Others say it was sincerely a necessary promise to balance all the chaos. But here, now, standing on the edge, it feels less like a reward and more like a resting room at the end of a long story. These souls don't look smug. They look tired in a peaceful way. You notice something else. Many of the souls here aren't alone. They walk in pairs, or groups, or sit under trees telling stories to one another. Legends say that in Elysium, your best self continues. Not the self that made mistakes. The version of you that loved most, tried hardest, and learned the lessons, even if it took too long. You walk past a woman teaching children how to paint with color that looks like sunlight. A man tuning a lyre beneath a fig tree. Two warriors, armor off, finally drinking together without a sword between them. They glance up as you pass, but they don't question you. They just accept that you're here. Maybe you're visiting someone. Maybe you're remembering. Farther ahead, there's a quiet grove where the wind sings through the leaves in long, melodic sighs. At its center, a stone table carved with a map not of land, but of lives. Dotted lines, stars, spirals, no names, no dates, just connections, paths, arcs that converge and diverge. You place a finger on one spiral, and it pulses softly. Like recognition, you don't know whose life it marks. Maybe your own, maybe someone else's. The grove accepts the not knowing. There's no throne here, no God to crown the worthy. Just a kind of ecosystem souls helping each other remember what it means to be human, even when they no longer are. A breeze moves through, carrying with it a soft, golden dust that smells like warm bread and cool moss. It lingers around you, then moves on. Everything here is transient, but not fragile. Time doesn't feel stopped. It feels irrelevant. You notice a group gathered near the edge of the field, where the horizon bends gently upward. They're listening to someone speaking, old man with one hand raised, the other holding a smooth stone. His words don't reach you, but you can tell they're about beginnings. Everyone is leaning in. And that's the truth about Elysium. It's not about endings. It's about what you carry forward. Even when there's nowhere left to go, you start to turn back. You're not meant to stay here either. You visited the fields of average souls, the pit of the punished, the courts of judgment, the rivers of forgetting and remembrance, and now the plain of peace. But there's one more space, the rarest one, a version of Elysium for the truly exceptional, the once in 1,000 souls. And it's said that to get there, you must choose to be reborn. You walk away from the golden plain of Elysium, and strangely, it doesn't dim behind you. It stays warm, gently glowing in your peripheral vision like a campfire left behind on a cold beach. But ahead, things change again. The path narrows not in space, but in feeling. Each step feels more deliberate. Like the underworld is watching to see what you do next. Not because it needs anything from you, but because you've now seen almost everything it has to show. Almost. You're approaching a place mentioned only in whispers. a myth within a myth, known as the Isles of the Blessed. Only the rarest souls go here, the truly heroic, the 3 lifetime paragons, those who've lived righteously not once, but again and again, choosing goodness without reward, without drama. It's a bonus level of paradise, but one you have to earn by choosing to come back and get it right more than once. In the older myths, this wasn't automatic. You had to accept reincarnation. You had to be born again into the mortal world, with all its risks, its absurdities without remembering anything. You had to do it all again, possibly many times, and still choose to live well. That was the price of reaching this hidden sanctum of eternity. So you're not walking toward a location anymore. You're walking toward a possibility. You pass through a corridor lit not by fire or glow, but by memory traces flickering scenes that rise from the floor like steam. A child helping a stranger, a queen sparing her enemy, a farmer planting trees he'll never live to see bloom. These aren't dramatic. They're small. That's the whole point. The Isles of the Blessed aren't reserved for warriors or poets. They're for those who made ordinary goodness their habit. You reach a small pool surrounded by concentric stone circles. This is Anamnesis Spring, known to a few obscure philosophers as the well of remembering before rebirth. If Lethe makes you forget, and Mnemosyne helps you remember, Anamnesis offers you a deal, a glimpse, a flash of who you've been. So, you can decide if it's worth trying again. You kneel beside the water. Your reflection doesn't show your face, it shows moments. One where you failed, one where you forgave, one where you laughed in spite of grief. You're not being judged here. You're just being shown, and you're being asked, do you want to go again? Historians still argue whether the Isles of the Blessed were ever considered real destinations or just moral scaffolding a way to remind people that virtue isn't always about big gestures, that real heroism is quiet, repeated, often unnoticed. Some myths say only a handful of souls ever made it here. Others suggest it was open to anyone brave enough to risk the pain of life all over again. You stand. No one will force you forward. There are no guards here. No gods. No gates. Just a shimmer in the distance like a coastline glimpsed through early morning fog. You can't see the island itself. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to choose it without knowing. You feel something shift. Not around you, within you, and then the path begins to pull away gently. Like the underworld is retracting itself. The walls unform. The rivers fade into streams of thought. Even the darkness softens into the kind of velvet you find behind your eyelids before sleep. You realize now you're being returned, not by boat, not by spell, just by drift. You've passed through every layer from judgment and terror to peace and rebirth, and you haven't asked for anything. You've simply observed, felt, and maybe learned. And that, it seems, is enough. The wind returns. Not the echoing hiss of the underworld, but a breeze. A real one. Carrying the smell of leaves and night air. You hear a sound. A very mundane one. It's your own breath. You're waking up. But before you leave entirely, something lingers, a soft whisper. No words, just a promise that when your story ends for real there will be places waiting, and paths, and choices You're rising now, not as if flying. Not quite like floating. More like being exhaled. The underworld slowly releases you. Not as a prisoner set free, but like a host, gently seeing off a guest who stayed long past sundown. There's no fanfare, no final judgment, just an easing, a letting go, like silk drawn from water. You don't pass through a door or cross a final bridge. The world above just begins to form again around you. Not with a bang. With detail, the first thing that comes back is sound. Distant. Soft. Crickets. Maybe. A breeze in the trees. Then smell. Night air. Cold stone. A hint of wet leaves. You're not entirely back in the world of the living. Not yet. But you're close enough that your thoughts begin to shape the space around you. And that's when you see him standing quietly, just as you last left him. Hermes, guide of souls, patron of travelers, mischief maker, the god who talks fast, walks faster, and doesn't make you feel weird for not knowing what to say. He's leaning against a pillar now, arms crossed, sandals slightly scuffed, looking amused. Long trip, he says, without asking. You nod. He chuckles. You looked under a lot of rocks? Most people just skim the highlights. He doesn't congratulate you. Though, that's not his style. No medals. No riddles. Just a raised eyebrow that somehow says, well done. Without the drama. Hermes doesn't walk you all the way out. Instead, he steps aside and gestures upward, toward a long, sloping path that glimmers faintly like moonlight caught in mist. You know the way, he says. You always did. You take one last look over your shoulder. The underworld isn't gone. It's just fading into memory. Its rivers now feel like thoughts. Its meadows like moods. Its monsters? Maybe shadows cast by something inside you? Not beneath you. Even Cerberus, that three-headed snuggle beast of doom, feels like a strange dream you once had about loyalty. And now it all gets tucked away. Not forgotten, just stored. Accessible if needed, but no longer pressing. You start to climb. Not quickly. There's no rush. This isn't the breathless sprint back to life. This is the gentle return. With each step, you feel more yourself. Your shape comes back. Your heartbeat grows louder in your ears. But it's comforting. Like a drum, tapping out your homecoming. And then, just when the surface seems near, when stars start appearing, one by one like blinking eyes, something shifts inside you. You remember, not the faces or places, but the feeling. The hush of Lethe, the pulse of Tartarus, the warmth of Elysium, the stillness of decision, and that strange moment at the fork in the path, where you realized that even doing nothing was a kind of answer. You carry that now, not like luggage, like rhythm. You emerge not into daylight, but into the soft violet glow of pre-dawn. The world is still quiet. Birds haven't started. No one's awake. The trees lean slightly, and a layer of dew gives every surface a ghostly shimmer. You're not quite alive yet. Not fully. You're in that in-between moment, when sleep hasn't completely let go, and the day hasn't fully arrived, and it's perfect. because what you've seen isn't meant to shout. It's meant to echo. And now you understand why the Greeks gave their dead coin snot to pay a fare. But to symbolize value, not of death, but of the journey. The idea that even after the end, there are maps, roads, maybe even choices. That nothing is final. Unless you want it to be, you sit for a moment. The soil beneath you is warm. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to seal in what you've gathered. Not facts, not names, just the understanding that death wasn't their fear. Meaninglessness was. So they built an underworld with rules and rivers and monsters and meadows. They gave it shape so they could navigate it. And now, so can you. The sky above begins to turn that color you only see for a few minutes each morning somewhere between lavender and silver. Like the horizon hasn't quite made up its mind. You feel your limbs again. Not as heavy weights, but as familiar things. Your hands flex slightly. Your feet nudge the earth. You're back, but not entirely. There's still a thread tying you to the world below, not dragging you down, but gently reminding you, you've seen what's there. You rise slowly, without the panic of waking or the urgency of motion, just up. And as you move, you notice that the world feels different now, not visibly changed. Trees are still trees. The wind still rustles the leaves. But there's a hush in it, a respect, like you've returned from somewhere older than the mountains. The underworld didn't claim you. It invited you, and you somehow were kind enough to leave it intact. In the distance, you hear the faintest ringing. Not a bell, not a kime, just a tone, a note that hums not in your ears, but somewhere between your spine and your stomach. It's the sound of being allowed back, of stepping once more into time, and as you do, images flicker across your mind, not like memories, but like etches. The sullen calm of asphodel, the shifting weight of judgment. In front of Minos, the sting of the sticks against your calves, the whispering souls in the field. Stacking stones, they'll knock over in an hour. The spinning wheel of Ixion, the frustrated groan of Sisyphus, the silence that surrounded Cronus like a second skin, and Nyx, just watching, always watching. You remember the moment you stepped through Lethe, just long enough to forget the pain but not the truth. You remember the laughter you heard? Faintly, from Elysium laughter that wasn't giddy, but satisfied. And you remember the fork, the one that wasn't really about direction, but about intention. It all returns in pulses. Not to haunt you, but to root you. Because now you understand what the Greeks feared wasn't dying. It was being unmoored, disconnected, forgotten, even by yourself. So they built myths that tied souls to stories, to consequences, to rivers and judges and coins and monsterso. Even if you vanished, you would still mean something. And that's the quiet truth you bring back. Meaning isn't given by gods or denied by monsters. It's chosen, built, grown through the very act of walking forward one river, one shadow, one decision at a time. You sit once more, feeling the sky warm behind you. The world is waking, now real birds, real wind, real light. Your dreamlike journey thins at the edges, dissolving like morning mist. But it doesn't disappear. It stays, not in your memory, but in your marrow, a soft imprint of myth stitched into the quiet space just behind your thoughts. And now, it's time to rest, not because you're tired, but because stories like this need stillness to settle. So, let's slow everything. Just a little more. You're lying still now. The blankets hold your shape. The air is still, with just the faintest trace of that phantom breeze from Elysium brushing softly against your cheek. You don't need to move. You've moved far enough for one night across rivers of memory, through chambers of fire and judgment, past fields of silence and into dreams beyond even death. And yet, you're safe. Here. Now. Breathing. Let the images fade naturally. Don't chase them. Let them retreat like shadows under moonlight. Let your body sink into the mattress. Your arms feel heavier now. And your eyes, if they're not already closed, flickering gently toward sleep. You've earned it. And those whispers you heard along the way? They're quiet now. Not gone, just satisfied. You visited the underworld. You watched and listened and didn't flinch. You didn't demand answers. You just walked. That was enough. The myths, the monsters, on the judges and rivers, they're still down there, humming softly in their own rhythms. And maybe someday you'll visit again. But for now, they're resting, and so are you. Let the room grow dimmer in your mind. Let the world fall away. And if you dream tonight, let it be slow. Let it be soft. Let it be yours. Sweet dreams.